Commander Sarah Chun stood at attention in the briefing room, her uniform crisp despite the sweltering heat of the military base. Around her, 12 seasoned SEALs shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some rolling their eyes, others whispering among themselves. At 28, Sarah was the youngest person ever to achieve her rank, and certainly the first woman to command an elite sniper unit. But respect was something she had yet to earn from her new team. "Gentlemen, meet your new commanding officer," announced Admiral Rodriguez, his weathered face betraying no emotion. Commander Chun brings extensive combat experience from 3 tours in Afghanistan and specialized training from the Naval Special Warfare Command. Lieutenant Marcus Tank Williams, a mountain of a man with arms covered in tattoos, let out a barely audible snort. "Sir, with all due respect, shouldn't someone with more traditional qualifications be leading this unit?" His words hung heavy in the air, and Sarah could feel every eye in the room measuring her worth. Sarah had heard these doubts before. Throughout her military career, she had faced skepticism at every turn. Her journey to this moment had been carved through years of proving herself again and again. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, she had been the daughter of immigrants who worked double shifts at a textile factory. Her father had fled Vietnam with nothing but determination, and her mother had crossed oceans to give their family a better life. They had instilled in Sarah a work ethic that bordered on obsession and a quiet strength that never bent, even under the heaviest pressure. "I understand your concerns," Sarah replied, her voice steady and clear. "I know what some of you are thinking. You're wondering if I can handle the physical demands, if I can make the tough calls, if I belong here at all." She paused, scanning the room with dark eyes that had seen more combat than most of the men before her. "I'm not here to convince you with words. I'm here to lead by example." The room fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning fighting against the desert heat. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, no relation to the Admiral, leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. At 35, he was a veteran of multiple deployments and had earned his reputation through countless successful missions. "Commander, no disrespect intended, but this unit has a perfect record. We've never lost a team member, never failed a mission. That kind of success comes from trust, and trust has to be earned." Sarah nodded slowly. "I wouldn't expect anything less from elite operators like yourselves. But I'd like you to consider something. My last unit extracted 47 hostages from a compound in Kandahar without a single casualty. Before that, I spent 18 months conducting reconnaissance operations behind enemy lines. I didn't get this command because the Navy wanted to make a statement. I got it because I've proven I can get the job done." Petty Officer Jake Morrison, barely 22, but already carrying the weathered look of someone who had seen too much, raised his hand tentatively. "Ma'am, what's your confirmed kill count?" The question was direct, almost crude, but it was the currency these men understood. In their world, precision and lethality meant the difference between coming home alive or in a flag-draped coffin. 93 confirmed, Sarah answered without hesitation. The number sat like a stone in the quiet room. Several of the SEALs exchanged glances, their expressions shifting slightly. It was a respectable number, higher than most of them could claim. But Tank Williams wasn't impressed. "Numbers on paper are one thing," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led men through hell and brought them back alive. "But what happens when the bullets start flying and everything goes wrong? What happens when you have to make a choice between saving one team member or completing the mission?" His questions weren't just challenges. They were the fears that kept combat leaders awake at night. Sarah had faced that exact choice before. 2 years earlier, during a mission to rescue a kidnapped diplomat, her spotter had been pinned down by enemy fire. She could have abandoned her position to help him, potentially compromising the entire operation and the lives of the hostages they were trying to save. Instead, she had stayed focused on her targets, systematically eliminating threats while coordinating her team's movement through a radio. Her spotter had made it out, the hostages had been rescued, and the mission had been a complete success. But the weight of those moments still pressed on her shoulders. "I've been there, Tank," she said, using his nickname for the first time. "I've had to make those choices, and I've lived with the consequences." That's what command means. It means accepting that every decision carries the weight of other people's lives. She moved closer to the group, her presence somehow filling the room despite her relatively small stature. "But I'll tell you what I won't do. I won't send anyone into danger I wouldn't face myself. I won't ask anyone to take a shot I couldn't make. And I won't ever put my own safety above the mission or the team." The skepticism in the room was still thick, but there was a shift, subtle but noticeable. These men had heard promises before, had seen commanders who talked big but crumbled under pressure. What they were looking for wasn't bravado or empty assurances. They wanted to know that the person giving them orders understood the stakes and had the skills to back up their authority. Corporal Dennis Mouse Patterson, a slight man whose nickname came from his ability to move silently through any terrain, spoke up from the back of the room. "Commander, what makes you think you can lead this unit better than someone who's been doing it for years?" It was a fair question, and Sarah appreciated its directness. "I don't think I'm better than anyone in this room," she said. "But I do think I bring something different. I've had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition that comes naturally to others. That's taught me to pay attention to details that might get overlooked. It's taught me to think creatively when conventional approaches don't work. And it's taught me that the only way to truly lead is to never stop proving yourself worthy of the responsibility." Admiral Rodriguez had been watching the exchange with interest. He had personally selected Sarah for this command, not because of politics or quotas, but because her record spoke for itself. Her precision under pressure was legendary among those who had served with her. Her tactical mind had impressed even the most seasoned special operations commanders. But most importantly, she had that rare quality that separated good soldiers from great leaders, the ability to inspire others to exceed their own limitations. "Commander Chun will be leading Operation Silent Thunder," the Admiral announced. "Intelligence has located a high-value target in a compound approximately 40 kilometers from here. The target is believed to be planning an imminent attack on Allied forces. Your mission is to eliminate the threat and gather any intelligence that might prevent future attacks." The room's atmosphere changed instantly. This wasn't a training exercise or a getting-to-know-you mission. This was real, with real consequences and real dangers. Sarah could see the shift in her team's posture as they transitioned from skeptical subordinates to professional operators preparing for combat. "Sir, when do we deploy?" asked Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, his earlier reservations momentarily set aside in favor of professional duty. "Wheels up at 0400, the Admiral replied. "You'll have 6 hours to plan and prepare. The target is time-sensitive, so there's no room for error." He turned to Sarah with a look that conveyed both confidence and warning. "Commander, your team's reputation precedes them. Don't let them down." As the Admiral left the room, Sarah found herself alone with 12 of the military's elite operators, each one still harboring doubts about her ability to lead them safely through what promised to be a dangerous mission. The weight of their skepticism was almost tangible, but she had carried heavier burdens before. Every challenge in her life had prepared her for this moment. From the bullying she had endured as the daughter of immigrants to the grueling training that had nearly broken her body and spirit from the first time she had taken human life through her rifle scope to the loneliness of command that separated her from the very people she was sworn to protect. "All right, gentlemen," she said, moving to the tactical display at the front of the room. "Let's talk about how we're going to accomplish this mission and get everyone home safely." She could feel their attention sharpening, their focus shifting from her gender to her competence. It was a start, but she knew that real respect would only come through performance under fire. The next few hours would determine not just the success of their mission, but whether she would truly become their leader or remain forever an outsider trying to prove herself worthy of their trust. In the unforgiving world of special operations, there were no second chances and no participation trophies. Results are the only currency that mattered, and Sarah Chun was about to make her first deposit into an account that would either establish her credibility or destroy her career. The briefing continued late into the night, with Sarah methodically going through intelligence reports, satellite imagery, and tactical options. Each question from her team was met with precise, well-reasoned answers. Each concern was addressed with the kind of thorough planning that separated successful missions from disasters. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dynamic in the room began to shift from antagonism to grudging professional respect. But respect earned in a briefing room was different from respect earned under fire. Tomorrow would bring the real test, and Sarah Chun knew that everything she had worked for in her military career hung in the balance of the next 24 hours. The helicopter's rotors cut through the pre-dawn darkness as Sarah's team approached their insertion point. Inside the aircraft, 12 SEALs made final equipment checks in the red glow of tactical lighting. The mood was professional but tense, with each operator focused on the mission ahead while still processing their new commander's capabilities. Sarah sat near the door, her sniper rifle secure between her knees, studying satellite photos one last time through her night vision scope. 2 minutes out, announced the pilot over their communication system. Below them, the rugged terrain of the target area stretched endlessly into shadows and rocky outcroppings. Intelligence indicated that their target, a bomb maker responsible for numerous attacks on coalition forces, was holed up in a fortified compound with an unknown number of guards. The mission parameters were clear: eliminate the target, secure any intelligence materials, and extract without casualties. Tank Williams moved closer to Sarah, his massive frame somehow managing to navigate the cramped helicopter with surprising grace. "Commander, how do you want to handle Overwatch?" he asked, his tone more respectful than it had been during their first meeting. The question was tactical, but it was also a test. How she positioned herself during the mission would tell his team whether she was a leader who shared risks or one who commanded from safety. "I'll take primary sniper position on the ridge overlooking the compound," Sarah replied without hesitation. "You and Rodriguez take point on the ground assault. Patterson and Morrison will handle perimeter security. I want clean sight lines to the entire target area before anyone moves in." Her plan placed her in the most exposed position, where she would be responsible for protecting her team while they advanced on the target. The helicopter descended toward a rocky plateau approximately 800 meters from their objective. As the aircraft touched down, Sarah's team moved with the fluid precision of operators who had trained together for years. Despite their reservations about their new commander, they were professionals who understood that personal feelings had no place in combat operations. Lives depended on their ability to function as a cohesive unit. Sarah shouldered her rifle and moved quickly toward the ridge that would serve as her sniper nest. The weight of her equipment was familiar and comforting: 47 pounds of gear that included her custom rifle, ammunition, communications equipment, and survival supplies. She had carried this load through mountains, deserts, and urban environments, and it felt like an extension of her own body. Behind her, Tank's team began their approach to the compound. Through her earpiece, she could hear their quiet communications as they moved through the terrain, reporting obstacles and adjusting their route based on her Overwatch guidance. "Dragon 6, this is Dragon 1, came Tank's voice, using her operational call sign. "We're approaching the outer perimeter. Do you have eyes on the target building?" Sarah had already settled into her firing position, her rifle's bipod extended and her scope trained on the compound below. The structure was larger than intelligence had suggested, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. Several vehicles were parked outside, and she could see movement in the windows. "Dragon 1, I count at least 8 possible hostiles, possibly more. 3 guards visible on the perimeter, 2 more near the main entrance. The target building appears to be the central structure with the satellite dish." The mission's complexity had just increased dramatically. Instead of the small operation they had planned for, they were facing a significantly larger force in a more fortified position. Sarah could feel the weight of command pressing down on her as she calculated angles, distances, and threat assessments. Every decision she made in the next few minutes would determine whether her team completed their mission successfully or whether they would be fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. Dragon 6 were seeing more movement than expected, reported Patterson from his position covering the team's left flank. Looks like they might have doubled their security since the last intelligence update. The concern in his voice was barely detectable, but Sarah caught it. These were experienced operators who had faced long odds before, but they were also men who understood the value of caution in hostile territory. Through her scope, Sarah watched as two more guards emerged from the main building, bringing the visible count to at least 10 hostiles. Her mind raced through tactical options, weighing the risks of proceeding with the mission against the potential consequences of aborting. The intelligence they were seeking could prevent attacks that might kill dozens of coalition soldiers. But pushing forward with insufficient information could result in casualties among her own team. All Dragon elements, hold position, she commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. I'm reassessing the tactical situation. She began systematically cataloging every detail visible through her scope. Weapons carried by the guards, defensive positions around the compound, potential escape routes, and any signs of additional forces that might not yet be visible. Her radio crackled with Tank's voice. Dragon 6, we're in a good position to assault, but the increased numbers change our risk profile. What's your call? The question carried the weight of command. Her team was looking to her for leadership in a situation that had become more dangerous than any of them had expected. This was the moment when theoretical authority transformed into practical leadership. Sarah had faced similar decisions before, but never with a team that was still evaluating her competence. She thought about her father's words from years earlier, spoken during one of their rare conversations about her military career. In war, he had said in his heavily accented English, the hardest choice is not between right and wrong. It is between two rights that cannot both exist. She was facing that choice now, the right to protect her team versus the right to complete a mission that could save other lives. Dragon elements were proceeding with modified tactics, she decided. The increased hostile presence actually confirms the intelligence value of this target. I'm going to eliminate the perimeter guards to create an opening for your approach. Tank, Rodriguez, be ready to move on my signal. Patterson, Morrison, watch for flanking movements or reinforcements. Through her scope, Sarah began selecting targets. The first guard was approximately 400 meters away, leaning against a wall while smoking a cigarette. The second was pacing near a vehicle, his AK-47 slung casually across his shoulder. The third was stationed near what appeared to be a communications antenna. Each shot would have to be precise and silent, taken quickly enough to prevent the guards from alerting others inside the compound. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the mental state that had made her one of the military's most effective snipers. The world around her seemed to shrink until nothing existed except the crosshairs of her scope and the targets below. Wind speed, bullet drop, target movement. All of these variables became part of an equation she solved instinctively. The first shot broke the silence of the early morning with a sharp crack that echoed off the rocky walls of the compound. The guard near the wall dropped instantly, his cigarette still glowing as it fell from his lifeless fingers. Sarah immediately shifted her aim to the second target, who had begun to turn toward the sound. Her second shot caught him center mass before he could identify the source of the threat. The third guard was more alert, already moving toward cover when Sarah's crosshairs found him. Her shot took him just as he reached for his radio, preventing any warning from reaching the fighters inside the compound. 3 shots, 3 kills, all within the space of 15 seconds. The perimeter was clear, but the hardest part of the mission was just beginning. Dragon 1, perimeter is clear. You're good to advance, Sarah reported, already scanning for new targets as Tank's team moved toward the compound. Through her scope, she could see movement inside the buildings as the remaining hostiles began to realize something was wrong. The element of surprise was rapidly disappearing, and the mission was about to transition from stealth operation to active combat. Tank's team moved with practiced efficiency, using the buildings themselves for cover as they advanced toward their primary target. Sarah maintained overwatch, her rifle trained on windows and doorways where threats might emerge. The tactical situation was fluid and dangerous, with multiple variables that could change in an instant. Everything depended on her ability to protect her advancing team while identifying and eliminating threats before they could engage her operators. Dragon 6, "We're taking fire from the eastern building," came Rodriguez's urgent voice over the radio. "Multiple shooters, automatic weapons. We need immediate suppression." Sarah could hear the distinct sound of AK-47 fire through her communication system, mixed with the sharper reports of her team's weapons as they returned fire from defensive positions. Without hesitation, Sarah shifted her aim toward the eastern building, scanning windows for muzzle flashes that would reveal enemy positions. She could see at least 3 fighters firing from different windows, their weapons creating a crossfire that had pinned her team behind minimal cover. This was the moment she had trained for throughout her entire career, the instant when tactical knowledge and shooting skills merged into life-or-death action. Her rifle spoke again, and one of the enemy fighters tumbled backward from his window. She immediately transitioned to the second target, adjusting for the different angle and distance. The second hostile dropped as her bullet found its mark, but the third had spotted her muzzle flash and was now directing fire toward her position. Bullets began striking the rocks around her sniper nest, sending fragments of stones spinning through the air. "Dragon elements. I'm taking fire from my position," Sarah reported calmly, even as she scrambled to relocate before the enemy could zero in on her exact location. Continuing engagement from alternate position. She low-crawled along the ridge, her rifle dragging behind her, until she found another spot with clear sight lines to the compound. The battle was intensifying rapidly. What had begun as a precision strike was evolving into a full-scale firefight as more enemies emerged from the buildings below. Sarah could see Tank's team advancing under fire, using tactical movement and coordinated suppression to close the distance to their objective. But they were outnumbered and exposed, dependent on her ability to eliminate threats faster than the enemy could deploy them. From her new position, Sarah resumed her systematic elimination of targets. Each shot was calculated and deliberate, designed not just to neutralize immediate threats, but to create psychological pressure on the remaining enemies. She could see hostiles becoming more reluctant to expose themselves as their comrades fell to her precise fire. Fear was becoming her ally in a battle where ammunition and positioning favored the enemy. The mission was reaching its critical phase, and Sarah knew that the next few minutes would determine whether Operation Silent Thunder succeeded or became a desperate fight for survival. Her team was counting on her not just for tactical support, but for the kind of leadership that inspired ordinary soldiers to achieve extraordinary results under the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. The compound had erupted into chaos as more enemy fighters poured from the buildings, turning what should have been a swift operation into an intense urban firefight. Through her scope, Sarah counted at least 15 hostiles now engaging her team, with more likely hiding inside the structures. Tank's assault team had managed to reach the main building, but was pinned down by crossfire from multiple positions. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Dragon 6, we need immediate support on the western approach," came Mouse Patterson's urgent voice through her earpiece. "3 hostiles moving to flank our position with an RPG." Sarah could hear the desperation creeping into his normally calm tone. An RPG in these confined quarters would be devastating to her team's defensive positions. Sarah swung her rifle toward the western side of the compound, scanning quickly for the RPG team. She found them moving through the shadows between buildings, one man carrying the distinctive silhouette of a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, while 2 others provided security. They were approximately 350 meters from her position, moving tactically but unaware of her overwatch. The lead man with the RPG stopped behind a concrete barrier, beginning to shoulder his weapon toward Tank's position. Sarah had perhaps 3 seconds before he could acquire his target and fire. Her crosshairs found his center mass, and she squeezed the trigger smoothly. The man dropped instantly, the RPG clattering harmlessly to the ground. His 2 companions immediately began searching for the source of the shot, their movements panicked and uncoordinated. RPG threat neutralized, Sarah reported, already tracking the remaining 2 fighters. She eliminated the second man as he tried to reach the dropped launcher, then quickly transitioned to the third, who was attempting to retreat back into the building complex. Her shot caught him just as he reached what he thought was safety, his body tumbling forward into the doorway. But even as she neutralized one threat, others were emerging. Sarah could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different windows as enemy fighters attempted to establish interlocking fields of fire against her advancing team. The tactical situation required her to process multiple threats simultaneously, prioritizing targets based on their immediate danger to her operators while maintaining awareness of her own exposed position. Through her scope, she spotted a particularly dangerous development. 2 fighters were setting up what appeared to be a heavy machine gun on the roof of the central building. If they succeeded in establishing that position, they would have commanding fire over the entire compound area, making it impossible for her team to maneuver or extract safely. Dragon 1, heavy weapon team setting up on the main building roof, she warned Tank. I'm engaging now. The machine gun team was at the extreme range of her rifle's effective capability, nearly 600 meters away and partially concealed behind rooftop infrastructure. It would require 2 perfect shots under combat conditions, with no room for error. Sarah steadied herself against the rocky outcropping, controlling her breathing despite the adrenaline surging through her system. The first target was feeding ammunition into the machine gun, while the second prepared to engage her team below. She had to eliminate both before they could bring their devastating firepower to bear on the mission. Her first shot traveled across the compound in less than a second, striking the gunner just as he settled behind his weapon. The impact sent him sprawling backward, but his partner immediately moved to take over the gun. Sarah's second shot caught him before he could properly sight the weapon, ending the immediate threat but drawing concentrated fire toward her position from other enemies who had observed her muzzle flashes. Bullets began impacting all around her sniper nest as enemy fighters attempted to suppress her Overwatch support. She could hear the distinctive whine of rounds passing close to her head, mixed with the sharp crack of bullets striking stone near her position. Despite the incoming fire, she maintained her focus on supporting her team's advance, knowing that any hesitation on her part could result in casualties among her operators. Dragon 6 were moving to the primary target building, Tank reported, his voice steady despite the obvious sounds of combat in the background. Rodriguez is wounded but mobile. We need you to keep those windows clear until we can breach the main entrance. Sarah felt a cold grip of concern at the news of Rodriguez's wound, but she pushed the emotion aside to focus on the tactical situation. Her team was depending on her precision to create the opening they needed to complete their mission. She began systematically engaging targets in the windows of the main building, her shots carefully aimed to eliminate threats while avoiding any risk to her advancing team members. The rhythm of combat had settled into a deadly pattern. Sarah would identify a threat, engage, and eliminate it, then immediately shift to the next target while enemy fighters attempted to locate and suppress her position. She had fired nearly 30 rounds since the engagement began, with each shot accounting for 1 eliminated hostile. Her ammunition supply was still adequate, but she was acutely aware that prolonged engagement would eventually exhaust her resources. Through her earpiece, she could hear Tank's team preparing to breach the main building. Dragon 1, stacking for entry, came his report. Request final suppression of ground floor windows. Sarah immediately shifted her fire to the windows Tank had indicated, putting rapid shots through each opening to discourage any defenders from engaging her team during their most vulnerable moments. The breach was explosive and violent. Sarah watched through her scope as Tank's team disappeared into the building, their movement coordinated and professional despite the hostile environment. For several minutes, she could only listen to fragmented radio communications as her team cleared rooms and searched for their primary target. The sounds of close-quarters combat echoed from the building below, sharp bursts of automatic weapons fire punctuated by the distinctive pops of flashbang grenades. Dragon 6, target secured, came Tank's welcome voice after what felt like an eternity. Primary objective eliminated. Searching for intelligence materials now. The relief in his tone was minimal but detectable. They had found and eliminated their bomb maker, but the mission was far from over. They still needed to search for actionable intelligence and extract safely from a hostile area. Sarah maintained her Overwatch position, scanning continuously for new threats while her team completed their search inside the building. She could see movement in some of the outlying structures, suggesting that additional enemy forces might be regrouping for a counterattack. The compound's layout provided numerous positions from which hostiles could emerge, and she knew that their current tactical advantage could disappear quickly if they were surprised by reinforcements. Dragon 6, we've got movement in the northern buildings, reported Morrison from his perimeter security position. Looks like at least 4 hostiles trying to get into position to cut off our extraction route. The tactical situation was becoming more complex as enemy fighters attempted to adapt to the unexpected resistance they were encountering. Sarah immediately shifted her attention to the northern sector, where she could indeed see figures moving between buildings in what appeared to be a coordinated attempt to establish an ambush position along their planned extraction route. These fighters were moving more cautiously than the initial defenders, suggesting they might be better trained or more experienced than the guards her team had initially encountered. "I see them," she confirmed, tracking the lead figure through her scope. 4 hostiles, armed with AK-47s and what looks like at least 1 grenade launcher. They're trying to establish a blocking position near grid reference Delta 7. She began calculating firing solutions for the multiple targets, taking into account their movement patterns and the available cover in their vicinity. The lead hostile was approximately 400 meters away, moving tactically from one piece of cover to another while his companions provided overwatch. Sarah waited for him to expose himself during his next movement, then sent a precisely aimed shot that dropped him immediately. The other 3 fighters immediately went to ground, making them more difficult targets but also disrupting their planned ambush. Through her scope, Sarah could see one of the remaining hostiles attempting to set up what appeared to be an RPG for a shot at the main building where her team was still conducting their search. The angle would allow him to potentially collapse part of the structure, trapping her operators inside or causing casualties through falling debris. She had to eliminate him before he could acquire a proper firing position. The shot was challenging due to the hostile's partial concealment behind a concrete wall, but Sarah could see enough of his torso to make the attempt. Her bullet struck him center mass just as he was shouldering the RPG, sending the weapon spinning away unfired. The remaining 2 fighters immediately began retreating toward more substantial cover, recognizing that their position had become untenable. "Northern sector threats neutralized," Sarah reported. "Extraction route should be clear, but maintain security awareness for additional hostiles." She continued scanning the area around the compound, knowing that the sounds of combat might attract reinforcements from other nearby positions or inspire local fighters to join the engagement. Inside the main building, Tank's team was completing their intelligence gathering. Dragon 6, we've recovered multiple hard drives and document caches, came Tank's update. Also found evidence of planned attacks on 3 coalition bases. This intelligence is going to save lives. The mission was proving even more valuable than originally anticipated, but Sarah knew that their real success would be measured by their ability to extract safely with their capture materials. As her team prepared to leave the building and begin their movement to the extraction point, Sarah noticed new activity on the compound's eastern perimeter. A vehicle was approaching rapidly, kicking up a dust cloud that suggested it carried multiple occupants. Through her scope, she could see armed figures leaning out of the vehicle's windows, clearly intending to reinforce the compound's remaining defenders. Dragon elements. Vehicle approaching from the east with multiple hostiles, she warned. Estimate 6 to 8 additional fighters inbound to your position. The arrival of reinforcements would complicate their extraction significantly, potentially turning their withdrawal into a running firefight through hostile territory. Sarah tracked the approaching vehicle through her scope, calculating the best moment to engage. If she could disable the vehicle before it reached the compound, she might eliminate multiple threats simultaneously. But if she missed or only damaged it, the surviving occupants would spread out and become individual targets requiring separate engagements. The vehicle was moving fast across the rough terrain, making a precise shot difficult but not impossible. Sarah led her target slightly, accounting for the vehicle's speed and the projectile's flight time. Her shot struck the driver through the windshield, causing the vehicle to veer sharply and roll over in a cloud of dust and debris. The crash eliminated several hostiles instantly and left the survivors disoriented and scattered. Vehicle neutralized, she reported, already scanning for any survivors who might still pose a threat. I count 2 possible survivors from the crash. Both appear injured but armed. The tactical situation remained fluid and dangerous, but her team had successfully eliminated their primary target and recovered valuable intelligence materials. Now came the most dangerous part of any special operations mission, the extraction phase, when tired operators had to maintain vigilance while carrying sensitive materials through potentially hostile territory to reach their pickup point safely. Tank's team emerged from the main building carrying heavy packs filled with intelligence materials, their movements purposeful but cautious as they prepared for the most dangerous phase of their mission. The extraction to their helicopter landing zone would require crossing 800 meters of open terrain while potentially under fire from any remaining hostiles in the area. Sarah maintained her overwatch position, systematically scanning every possible threat avenue as her team began their withdrawal. Dragon elements, beginning movement to extraction point, Tank reported, his voice carrying the focused intensity of a professional under pressure. Rodriguez's wound is manageable, but we're moving slower than planned. Sarah could see her team through her scope, noting that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was indeed favoring his left arm, but still maintaining his position in their tactical formation. As her team moved away from the compound, Sarah began her own careful withdrawal from the sniper position she had occupied for the past hour. The rocky ridge had provided excellent overwatch of the target area, but it also left her exposed and alone, nearly a kilometer from her team's position. Her extraction route would take her through terrain that offered minimal cover while carrying equipment that made rapid movement difficult. She had barely moved 50 meters from her original position when movement caught her eye through her scope. In the distance, beyond the compound they had just cleared, she could see dust clouds indicating multiple vehicles approaching rapidly. Through the heat shimmer and distance, she counted at least 3 trucks carrying what appeared to be substantial reinforcements for the compound her team had just neutralized. Dragon 1, we have a problem, Sarah transmitted urgently. Multiple vehicles approaching the compound from the south. Estimate 20 to 30 additional hostiles inbound. The approaching force was significantly larger than anything they had faced during the mission, suggesting that their target had been more important than intelligence reports had indicated. Tank's response was immediate and professional. Dragon 6, how long before they reached the compound? The question carried weight beyond simple timing. If the reinforcements arrive quickly, they might be able to track her team's withdrawal route and organize pursuit. If Sarah's team was caught in the open during their movement to the extraction point, they would be facing overwhelming odds with limited ammunition and no cover. Through her scope, Sarah watched the lead vehicle navigate the rough terrain leading to the compound. Estimate 6 to 8 minutes before they reach the target area, she reported. But they're moving fast and appear well organized. This looks like a planned response, not random reinforcements. The implication was clear. Their mission had been compromised somehow, or their target had been more significant than anyone had realized. Her team was now approximately halfway to the extraction point, moving across relatively open ground with minimal concealment available. If the approaching force included experienced trackers or had access to aerial reconnaissance, they would be able to follow her team's route and potentially cut off their escape. Sarah faced a critical decision that would determine whether her team extracted safely or found themselves fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. Dragon elements, continue to extraction point, she commanded. I'm going to delay the pursuit. The decision was tactical, but also personal. By remaining behind to engage the reinforcements, she would be placing herself in extreme danger while giving her team the time they needed to reach safety. It was exactly the kind of leadership decision that would either vindicate her command or result in her death. Tang's voice came through her earpiece immediately. Dragon 6, negative. We don't leave team members behind. We can find defensible positions and wait for additional support. His objection was both professional and personal. These operators had built their reputation on never abandoning their teammates, regardless of the tactical situation. Dragon 1. That's not a request, Sarah replied firmly. Continue to extraction. I can delay them long enough for you to reach the helicopter, then extract through alternate route. She was already moving to a new position that would give her clear fields of fire toward the approaching vehicles while providing some protection from return fire. The lead vehicle had reached the compound, and soldiers were rapidly dismounting, their movements suggesting discipline and training beyond what her team had encountered earlier. Through her scope, Sarah could see officers organizing search teams and establishing security perimeters. These were not local militia or hastily organized offenders. They appear to be regular military forces with professional equipment and tactics. Sarah settled into her new firing position, a rocky outcropping that provided cover from three sides while offering clear sight lines to the compound and surrounding area. She had approximately 40 rounds of ammunition remaining, along with her sidearm and 2 fragmentation grenades. Against 30 armed opponents, her only advantage would be surprise, superior position, and the psychological impact of precise long-range fire. The search teams were beginning to spread out from the compound, following obvious tracks and signs left by her team's movement toward the extraction point. Sarah could see one team of 4 soldiers moving directly along her team's route, while others established security positions or searched the buildings for intelligence about who had conducted the raid. Her first shot took the lead tracker at approximately 500 meters, dropping him instantly and causing immediate confusion among his teammates. The sound of her rifle echoed across the rocky terrain, drawing attention toward her general area, but not revealing her exact position. The remaining search teams immediately went to ground, their advance halted by the realization that an enemy sniper was still active in the area. Through her earpiece, she could hear Tank's team continuing their movement toward extraction. Dragon 6 were 5 minutes out from the landing zone, came Mouse Patterson's voice. Helicopter is inbound and will be ready for immediate pickup. The timing was critical. She needed to keep the pursuit forces occupied for at least 10 more minutes to ensure her team's safe extraction. Sarah shifted her aim to a group of soldiers who were attempting to establish a heavy weapons position near the compound. If they succeeded in setting up machine guns or mortars, they could potentially engage the extraction helicopter or interdict her team's final approach to the landing zone. Her shot eliminated the soldier carrying the machine gun's tripod, while follow-up shots scattered the rest of the weapons team. The enemy response was swift and professional. Instead of charging blindly toward her position, they began coordinating indirect approaches using available cover. Sarah could see teams moving to flank her position from multiple directions, their movements suggesting tactical training and combat experience. She was facing the kind of organized opposition that had ended the careers of many overconfident snipers. All Dragon elements. I need confirmation of your extraction status, Sarah transmitted while tracking a flanking team through her scope. The enemy soldiers were approximately 600 meters away, moving carefully from rock to rock while staying below the ridge line that might expose them to her fire. Dragon 6, we're the landing zone, came Tank's immediate response. Helicopter touchdown in 30 seconds. But we're not leaving without you. What's your extraction plan? The concern in his voice was evident, as was his reluctance to abandon his commanding officer to face overwhelming odds alone. Sarah eliminated 2 more soldiers from the flanking team before responding. Execute extraction now. I have alternate egress route planned. It wasn't entirely true. She had identified possible escape routes, but none that offered high probability of success against the coordinated pursuit she was facing. Her primary concern was ensuring her team's safety, even if it meant accepting significant personal risk. The sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance as the extraction aircraft approached the landing zone. Sarah knew her team would be safely away within minutes, but she also knew the enemy forces below would soon realize their primary targets were escaping. Once that happened, they would likely focus all their attention on capturing or eliminating the sniper who had been harassing their operations. Through her scope, she could see the search teams regrouping near the compound, their officers clearly coordinating a more aggressive response to her continued presence. 2 teams were moving to cut off her most obvious escape routes, while a third was establishing a support-by-fire position that could suppress her current location with concentrated automatic weapons fire. Sarah made the decision to relocate before the enemy could coordinate their next assault. She low-crawled away from her current position, dragging her rifle and equipment toward a secondary firing position she had identified earlier. The movement was exhausting and left her temporarily vulnerable, but staying in one place would have resulted in her being overwhelmed by concentrated fire. Her radio crackled with Tank's voice. Dragon 6, we're airborne and clear the area. Helicopter is available for your extraction at alternate landing zone Delta. Give us your position and estimated time of arrival. The relief in his voice was mixed with determination. Her team was safe, but they were committed to ensuring her safe extraction as well. From her new position, Sarah could see the enemy forces spreading out in a coordinated search pattern. They had realized she was no longer in her original location and were systematically clearing potential hiding spots. She estimated approximately 25 soldiers still actively pursuing her, armed with automatic weapons and supported by radio communications that allowed them to coordinate their movements. Dragon 1, I'm moving to alternate extraction point, she transmitted while scanning for immediate threats. Estimate 20 minutes to reach landing zone Delta, depending on opposition encountered during movement. The alternate extraction point was nearly 2 kilometers away through terrain that offered limited concealment and multiple opportunities for ambush. As Sarah began her movement toward the alternate landing zone, she reflected on the mission that had brought her to this moment. Operation Silent Thunder had been more successful than anyone had anticipated. They had eliminated a high-value target, recovered intelligence that would save coalition lives, and demonstrated the effectiveness of her team's capabilities. But, more importantly for her personal situation, she had proven her worth as a leader under the most demanding circumstances possible. The skepticism she had faced from Tank and the others seemed distant now, replaced by the kind of professional respect that could only be earned through shared danger and demonstrated competence. Their willingness to risk their own extraction to ensure her safety spoke to the bond that had formed between them during the mission. She was no longer an outsider trying to prove herself. She was their commander, and they were committed to bringing her home safely. Moving carefully through the rocky terrain, Sarah used every piece of cover available while maintaining awareness of the enemy forces still searching for her. She could hear their radio communications in the distance, along with the sound of vehicles moving to establish blocking positions along possible escape routes. The professional nature of their response confirmed her earlier assessment. These were trained soldiers, not militia fighters. After 40 minutes of careful movement through hostile territory, Sarah finally reached the alternate extraction point. The helicopter was waiting, its rotors turning, and engines ready for immediate departure. As she climbed aboard, Tank reached out to help her into the aircraft, his massive hand gripping her arm with surprising gentleness. "Welcome back, Commander," he said simply, but the respect in his voice was unmistakable. Around the helicopter, the faces of her team showed relief mixed with admiration. They had watched her place herself in extreme danger to ensure their safety, demonstrating the kind of leadership that inspired absolute loyalty among elite operators. As the helicopter lifted off and headed toward friendly territory, Sarah looked back at the compound where her leadership had been tested under fire. 12 hostiles eliminated, primary target neutralized, critical intelligence recovered, and her entire team extracted safely despite overwhelming odds. Operation Silent Thunder had been a complete success by any measure. More importantly, she had earned something that couldn't be granted by promotion or assigned by headquarters. She had earned the respect of warriors who measured worth not by rank or credentials, but by performance when lives hung in the balance. The woman who had faced skepticism and doubt 12 hours earlier was now a proven combat leader whose team would follow her into any mission. Knowing that she would never ask them to take risks, she wouldn't accept herself. Tank leaned over to speak above the helicopter's noise. "Commander, I owe you an apology. We all do. What you did back there." He paused, searching for words that could adequately express what he had witnessed. That's the kind of leadership that makes the difference between good units and legendary ones. Sarah nodded acknowledgement, but her thoughts were already turning toward future missions and the responsibilities of command. She had proven herself in combat, but real leadership meant consistently performing at this level while helping her team members achieve their own potential. The skeptics had been silenced by her actions, but maintaining their respect would require the same level of dedication and competence in every mission that followed. As their helicopter disappeared into the dawn sky, the compound below them stood silent, except for the wind moving through abandoned buildings. Operation Silent Thunder was complete, but for Commander Sarah Chun and her team, it was just the beginning of a partnership forged in combat and strengthened by shared respect. The doubters who had questioned her ability to lead elite warriors had received their answer in the most definitive way possible, through actions that spoke louder than any words ever could.